pull your microphones forward and turn them on. I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 28th, 2022, to the Town of Niskayuna Planning Board and Zoning Commission meeting. Mr. Henry, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Laflamme.
Here.
Mr. Screbutenis.
Here.
Mr. Khan.
Here.
Mr. McPartland.
Here.
Mr. Darpino.
Here.
Ms. Shenfield.
Here.
Ms. Gold.
Here.
Ms. Strang.
Here.
Chairman Walsh.
Here. Okay, we have the minutes from the November 14th, 2022 meeting that were included in your packet. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. DiArpino for approval. Do I have a second?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Screbutenis. Thank you. Corrections or changes? I got a few minor things. I guess I'll go over those first, make it easy. First one is under the, let me turn the page here. Under members present, Daisy Shenfield should have a virtual after her name. Okay. And then we got a couple other minor comments from, thanks, Mr. DiArpino. Line 120, which is on page 4. It states underground for the building for Mr. Ritmo, when in reality it's just the first floor park or first level parking. So change underground to first level on line 120. And then on line 156, just a typo. And it should, let me see, get 156. On line 156, right at the end of the sentence, it's just a typo. It should be buildings, that word. And that's all I have. Does anybody else have anything else? Any other comments, corrections? No? All right. And those are pretty simple. Let's just do a show of hands or all those in favor of modifying the minutes as suggested signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Hearing none opposed, we have modified minutes. And all those in favor of the approval of the minutes as modified signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, hearing none opposed or anything, the minutes for the November 14th, 2022 meeting are approved. We have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move right to privilege of the floor. Anyone wishing to be heard regarding any planning and zoning matters in the town of Niskayuna, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and we gladly listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charles Horowitz. I live at 1223 Ruffner Road, and I wanted to address the Mohawk Country Club townhouses. I wanted to say that I have been living here for over 33 years in that house. And I know the neighborhood. I know the people in the neighborhood. It's a very stable neighborhood. People move there. They stay there 10, 20, 30 years. There are even people there longer than I have been there. I've known people who die in those houses. That's how stable it is. This is not a rental neighborhood. This is not where people move in and flip houses and turn them over. This is a very stable area. In my conversations with people, people are opposed to this project. It's as simple as that. People do not like it. Nobody thought that this was going to occur when they moved in. This was not part of any title search or any information anybody had moving in. This is a surprise. For me personally, this is a project where I think if Mohawk Country Club wants to do it, let them do it at the other end of the golf course. Now, I've asked them, why don't you do it on the other end? Why don't you do it where there's already access road, where there's plenty of room? They are adamantly opposed to it, adamantly. They don't want it there. What I would like to ask you to do is ask them why. And if they are honest, they will give the same reasons that I'm giving. We don't want it there. They do not want to interrupt their view, their membership. They're putting it in the farthest most corner away from the rest of the club. And they're putting it in my backyard. Ask them why. Now, to me, this is like a neighbor putting in a chicken coop, behind their garage, right outside my bedroom window. And I say to them, why are you putting it there? Why don't you put it outside your bedroom window? And the response would be, we want the eggs, but we don't want the stink. That's what this project means to me.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, privilege of the floor. Anybody here in public would like to speak? Ms. King, did you have something? Make sure you pull that microphone down and speak into it, okay?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Okay. I'm Gail King, Niskayuna business owner, property owner, and business property owner. I'm speaking tonight in protection of my property at 2220 Crescent and 2215 Knott Street. Again, I ask, are you listening? Are you recording this meeting? We have been told for decades, 2215 has to have those 4 spaces in front for your legal count. How do we defend our property? You are making laws that give the new guy the impression that he can walk all over us and our property. Laws and precedences are being changed for a bar restaurant. Never allowed in this area, yes, because there is not enough parking. Changing the status of the plaza did not add more spaces. Residential with children all around. The county just blacktopped a road over 15 parking spaces that have not been replaced. You, our town planners, are turning your back on the shopkeepers that have served downtown Niskayuna since the late 1930s. You count the same spaces over and over and say, see, there are enough spaces. 1 week's notice to defend my property. Only a few neighbors are notified and too late to man a defense. Proposed outdoor seating adds 20 people needing additional parking. Is this in addition to the 50 people total mandated and voted by the planning board? This is existing parking you are commandeering, already assigned and counted for others. Because Nishi wants this, you are giving our access and our use of our property away to others. This proposed bar extension is town property. This will set a precedence. All town right-of-ways can be built on and used for private enterprise, even blocking entrances to established businesses. Blocking parking for apartment residents who live and sleep here at night. Is this a calculated plan to allow only bars and small groceries? The 3 buildings in the middle are being crowded out, walked on. 2215 Knott Street and 2220 Crescent have businesses and residential apartments. We are being told bar people can park in their spaces at night, forcing the resident women and men to walk between the buildings and past the bar people to get to their apartments. What has happened to Niskayuna? Allowing sidewalk eating and drinking with children sleeping in all the houses. The town planners and elected officials have made a big mistake. And again, I ask, who is benefiting and how much? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Thomas Nicky. Excuse me, I'm just getting my voice back. I own the Broken Inn restaurant at 2209 Knott Street in Niskayuna. On May 23rd, I presented to you our design for increased safety measures and outdoor seating at the corner of Clifton Park Road and Knott Street. That was 189 days ago. Since that point, I've spent dozens of hours and thousands of dollars to design a safer space for everyone, more car parking, an area for people to park their bicycles, a safe place for families to sit, whether they order an ice cream cone or not, and one that people want to use to gather and enjoy each other's company, all of which at no cost to the town. Also, since this process began, this board has received nearly 200 letters from the community, most of which have been overwhelmingly in support of this project. 200 letters, which I had to submit a Freedom of Information Act request and wait a month to receive, just so I could read and learn from them, as only a few were actually shared at these public meetings. All from people who live in this town, and all asking you to take action. And for a time you did act. We had discussions in these meetings. They were great. We responded accordingly, having 5 design revisions done at our expense and based on your direction and your requests. But those days are long past. Tonight, this planning board will again not discuss this project, despite my repeated requests, and has not discussed it at this planning board level in 56 days. At present, we have 2 separate proposals for review. The most recent was submitted 20 days ago, and while we have not heard even one word back about it being reviewed or discussed, our check that accompanied that was deposited the very next day. I've sat in these meetings and seen proposals approved for the likes of Chase Bank and Starbucks to operate right here in Niskayuna, yet the planning board will not even discuss ours. As you likely remember, I stood here 5 weeks ago, and again 2 weeks ago, also during privilege of the floor, expressing my disappointment and asking someone to step up. No one has. The planning board looks to the town planner. The town planner points to the lawyer says they're investigating. We provide a workable solution, and no one responds. I did not come here tonight to complain. I came here to ask yet again, please, someone step up and get our proposal discussed again. Our community, 200 of whom took the time to stop what they were doing to write you, deserve it. There's only one planning board meeting left in all of 2022. It's 2 weeks from today on Monday, December 12th. Again, I would prefer to be talking with you at that meeting instead of at you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Privilege of the floor. Anyone here would like to be heard before we close it?
My name is Cynthia Fairbanks. I've lived in Niskayuna for 14 years, and I'd like to have someone speak to the impact on the school population for the build of the Mohawk Country Club. I was a past PTO president at Rosendale Elementary, and I know that we've had many conversations about the overpopulation of the Niskayuna School District, and I'd like that to be addressed in the consideration of the Mohawk Country Club.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else here in town hall would like to speak at privilege of the floor? Okay, seeing no one here. Laura, we have anybody online, virtual, that would like to speak tonight?
I did receive a request for someone to attend, but they didn't want to speak, and I actually don't see them here, so I think we're good.
Okay, how about any letters or emails?
No emails submitted.
Okay,
Laura, did the person say what topic it was on?
I believe they were just wanting to listen for the Empire subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Hearing or seeing no one for privilege of the floor, we'll close privilege of the floor. Thank you for your comments. And we'll move on to our unfinished, well, we have no unfinished business tonight, so we'll go right to new business. And under new business, we have 2 resolutions tonight. The first resolution being Resolution 2022-31. This is a resolution for a minor subdivision approval of tax map parcel 61-133.2 on Empire Drive into 2 separate lots, one 0.83 acres and one 2.0 acres. Now, the resolution was posted online. It's lengthy, but we always, I try to read the conditions out loud, so if you please bear with me, there's quite a few, and I'm going to try to get through those, okay? Resolved that the Planning Board and Zoning Commission does hereby grant minor subdivision approval for a two-lot subdivision at tax map parcel 61-1-33.2 as shown on a two-page drawing entitled Layout Plan Two-Lot Minor Subdivision in Details Two-Lot Minor Subdivision respectively by CT Mail Associates dated 6/30/22 with a most recent revision dated 11/16/22, subject to the following conditions. 1. Prior to recording the plat, any engineering and drainage concerns will be addressed to the satisfaction of the town superintendent of water, sewer, and engineering. 2. Prior to recording the plat, as noted under the heading Filter Strip and Level Spreader Notes of the aforementioned site plan drawings, a deed restriction shall be filed with the town affirming that no development or alteration of the filter strip area is allowed. 3. The Niskayuna Tree Council walked the property and noted a copy of a drawing entitled Layout Plan to Lot Minor Subdivision by CT Mail Associates with respect to existing high-value trees. No clear boundary areas along the north and south property lines are identified. Trees in these areas are to be preserved to maintain a buffer between neighboring properties. Several trees in the approximate vicinity of the newly created property line between the two new lots shall be preserved. The Tree Council placed ribbons on trees of value near the limits of clearing. The trees marked with the ribbon should not be removed during the construction of a new single-family homes without notification to the Tree Council that they are being removed. The Planning Board requests that as many trees as possible, including unmarked trees and understory, be preserved during the building permit and construction process so that the forested nature of the land is maintained. 4. Prior to recording the plat, any minor textural changes to the subdivision map will be addressed to the satisfaction of the Town Planning Department. 5. Prior to recording the plat, a street tree planting plan shall be submitted to and approved by the Niskayuna Tree Council. 6. Prior to recording the plat, the multi-use path easement shall be submitted to the town for review and approval by the legal department, and once approved, a signed copy of the easement with recording fee shall be submitted to the town of Niskayuna. 7. Prior to issuing a building permit, the new houses shall be referred to and reviewed by the Architectural Review Board. 8. In accordance with Chapter 180 of the Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Ordinance of the town of Niskayuna, the applicant shall put in place soil erosion and sediment control measures sufficient to stabilize disturbed areas. These measures shall be satisfactory to the superintendent, water, sewer, and engineering, and shall remain in place until such time as natural vegetation has been successfully established. 9. Wetland boundaries shall be recorded and shown on any plot plan of a building lot containing wetlands. Wetlands may not be disturbed, drained, or physically altered in any way without first contacting the Army Corps of Engineers. Additionally, the town of Niskayuna requires that no land be disturbed within a 25-foot buffer from the boundary of the wetland. 10. Should the garage floor elevation GFE for individual lots deviate by more than 6 inches from the elevations approved for construction by the Planning Board and Zoning Commission or the Building Department, then revised grading plans shall be submitted immediately to the town's engineering office for the review and approval. 11. The limits of clearing to this subdivision shall be strictly adhered to during construction to the maximum extent practicable. The applicant shall retain as many of the site's healthy trees and native vegetation as possible. Driveways shall be installed with the least possible disturbance to trees. 12. Prior to issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall participate in a pre-construction meeting with the town of Niskayuna, if so requested by the planning or building department. And 13, as noted in the section entitled Filter Strip and Level Spreader Notes of the aforementioned site plan drawing, the gravel diaphragm level spreader is to be inspected and maintained by the property owners per the requirements of the project SWIP. The maintenance requirements shall be noted on the recorded subdivision and all future lot plans for this property. And finally, number 14, no further subdivision of these parcels shall be allowed. Okay. Mr. McPartland, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move for adoption of the resolution of minor subdivision.
Move for adoption by Mr. McPartland. Do I have a second?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Scributinus. Board discussion? And applicant, if you want to come forward, you have anything that you'd like to discuss at all? Most of the conditions are pretty standard. Do you, any comments at all? I guess the only thing I'd like to say, I appreciate the hard work you put into this subdivision. I know there's lots of concerns by both Niskayuna residents and Town and County residents. And I appreciate the effort that went into the engineering and working with the town designated engineer to be able to come through this. So thank you very much. Okay,
Yeah, I'd also like to add that this is the first time that we've seen a forest take a stormwater pond rather than clearing the forest and building a stormwater pond. And I think that solution helped both with people's concerns about the forest being removed, and there was a lot of concern about the stormwater. So I also feel like there was a positive outcome with the way that the engineer figured out how to handle the stormwater.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or anything from the board? Okay, Mr. Henry, please call the roll.
Mr. Laflamme,
Aye.
Mr. Scributinus,
Aye.
Mr. Khan,
Aye.
Mr. McPartlin,
Aye.
Mr. Darpino,
Aye.
Ms. Shenfield,
Aye.
Chairman Walsh.
Aye. Motion carries. The resolution's approved. Thank you, everyone. And thank you. All right. All right. Next resolution is Resolution 2022-32, a resolution for site plan approval of new signage for Momentive Performance Materials at 2750 Balltown Road. Again, resolution was posted, and I'm just going to read a little bit here. Whereas, as proposed, the Momentive sign shown on the Momentive CH letters page of the sign package measures 297 inch wide times 48 inch high. That's 99 square feet. Therefore, the variance of 49 square feet a facade sign area was required. Whereas as proposed, the V sign shown on the Momentive drawing page of the sign package is the second facade sign on the building facade and measures 52 inches wide times 72 high, which is 26 square foot. Their variance for the second facade sign measuring 26 square feet is required. Whereas the Niskayuna Zoning Board of Appeals granted the variance as written at their regularly scheduled meeting on November 16, 2022, with the following condition: signs shall be lit between sunset and 8:30 p.m. Okay, this board has carefully reviewed the proposal by this resolution, thus set forth its decision hereon. Now, therefore, be it hereby resolved that the Planning Board and Zoning Commission finds that this site plan referenced above meets the requirements of the zoning code and hereby approves this site plan amendment. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion. Okay, you got it.
Motion by Mr. Scributinus for approval, and
Seconded.
seconded by Mr. Khan. You want to have some discussion? Pretty straightforward. I know I was talking to Mr. McQueenie before the meeting. Would you like to say?
Good evening. So I have a question. During the zoning board of appeals meeting, when I was asked, when we talked about the hours of operation for the sign, I'll be transparent. I think I got caught off guard. I never had any discussions with some of our leadership team on the hours of operation, how long we want to leave it illuminated. So I used my logic and thought 8:30 p.m. was adequate. What I'm trying to find out is there a process that allows me to revisit the hours of operation for that sign with the zoning board of appeals?
I think that there is, but you would have to go back to the zoning board of appeals to do that.
I'd have to go back to the zoning board of appeals.
Since they're the ones that set the condition,
Okay.
because they granted the variance with that condition, so in order to change the condition, they would be the ones that would have to change it.
Yeah. They would, okay. And I think how I would,
You can contact
I would,
the building department and they can help you
okay.
arrange for
I have
that.
to make application again, right, and get on the agenda.
Yeah, but you
That'll-
could still process your building permit and get the signs up. And then if you did feel like that was a restrictive condition and you wanted to revisit the zoning board, you could go back and ask. them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's restrictive or not. I just, out of all the things I thought through and talked about with some of our leadership team, I did not talk about the hours of operation. So they may or may not have a strong opinion on what we talked about and what the zoning board of appeals approved. So I'd want to facilitate some feedback from them. And if they have a strong opinion, then I would want to bring that to the ZBA and ask them to consider changes if there's a strong opinion on it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns, or comments from the board regarding the resolution? Nope. Okay, hearing none. Mr. Henry, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Laflamme,
Aye.
Mr. Scributinus,
Aye.
Mr. Khan,
Aye.
Mr. McPartlin,
Aye.
Mr. Darpino,
Aye.
Ms. Shenfield,
Aye.
Chairman Walsh.
Aye. Motion carries. The resolution is approved. Thank you, Mr. McQueenie, and good luck with everything down there. Appreciate it. All right, move on. Let's see. Where is it? in the pile of paper here somewhere. There it is. Okay, so we'll move on to discussion items. First up under discussion is 2721 Balltown Road, application for construction of 2 additional 6-unit apartment buildings on the premises along with an accessory garage and associated parking. And this is the Ritmo project, the old Aqueduct Animal Veterinarian Hospital. And Mr. DiArpino is the project lead. Do we have anybody here tonight for talk about that? We just wanted to talk a little bit.
Yeah, he's up.
Rob Snout is online.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
Great.
All right. I think tonight all we want to do is just touch base because, we're getting closer to making our recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And if I'm correct, Laura, is the plan to have this on the December docket for the ZBA?
Yeah, so the December meeting is the latest you can make the recommendation. The applicant hasn't had a chance to modify the plans per the planning board's request, but Clark and I did want you to have the time to consider at least the CAC's initial thoughts during their discussion. They would be making a seeker recommendation to the zoning board in their December meeting. So a couple things they had asked. Well, I wanted to say overall, they were pretty concerned about the project, especially density and impacts to the surrounding community. Some of the things that they thought were helpful to think about would be a Forever Wild designation in the back of the property. These are their sort of typical recommendations that they send to you, like solar panels on the roofs of the garages, pesticide-free lawns. Based on the church that has been working on the clearing in the back of the yard for the gazebo, because this property is so close by, they thought that they may need to do a historic survey, just based on the proximity to a recent one that was required. And they wanted a water and sewer to see if the water and sewer could handle the additional units and a traffic report because they were concerned about the issues to Baldwin Road.
Okay. All right. And as far as anything else new with the project, I mean, these are a lot of these things, if obviously it gets through the Zoning Board of Appeals, we'll address except for the seeker determination or there'd be a seeker recommendation from the Conservation Advisory Council.
Yeah, to the zoning
Yeah,
board,
yeah.
actually, because it's a use
Yep.
variance. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any? So I guess one thing I wanted to talk about tonight, see how we stand on this, right? We don't want to have too many surprises on the December meeting. So if anybody has any thoughts that they'd like to share with, amongst the board, with the public, with the applicant, it's a good opportunity to do that today. And I think that's one of the reasons we want to have it down as discussion. So I'm going to start with opening it. I got some thoughts. I can lead off or I just open it to the board. If anybody has any concerns, let me go ahead.
Yeah.
Could we just have a brief discussion about the recommendation we're making to the ZBA? It sounds like if it's a use variance, they're going for the site plan modifications aren't as determinative of our recommendation. But I wanted to understand how the recommendation would be changed with any site plan revisions.
Yeah, and before you answer, that's one of the things I want to talk about. So thank you, Mr. It's
Okay.
perfect. Because, we have the denial letter and it's strictly use variance, 3 items, right? The construction of additional multifamily dwellings. Let's see, it's proposed construction of 2 additional dwelling, use variance for that. And then one item is they're not listed as a principal or special permitted use in that area. But the applicant, when I read the applicant's submittal to the Zoning Board of Appeals, they talk about area variances. So has a determination, I guess, been made that there is no area variances by de facto if we grant, or the Zoning Board of Appeals grants the use variance? Does that take care of the area variances? Or are we going to have to go back once we come up with a design for area variances?
We don't.
We don't think, I'm sorry.
It was not the determination that if the use variance was granted, that no area variances would be needed. There would be area variances needed. And I think that, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the application was for the current project and what the applicant believed the area variances necessary were going to be.
Yeah, the applicant submitted an appeal, although the denial hasn't been updated, requesting the area variance to the multifamily setback. The only concern I have with that is that typically when a zoning board grants an area variance, it's for that building in that place. Like when they're looking at a 6-foot fence, like, and they get a 6-foot fence area variance, they can't just blanket put a 6-foot fence wherever they want. It's for that location. And so, my concern with the area variance request right now is that it would essentially like lock that building into where it is. You couldn't flip flop it. So if they go to the zoning board and they get an area variance for that building to that lot line of 25 feet, you couldn't flip flop it. And so if they come back to the planning board and say, okay, I don't want that building there, or the planning board says you have to reconfigure that, it's going to trigger a different area variance, I guess is what I'm saying. Or I'm not thrilled about taking the area variance at this point because it's a preliminary site plan.
Yep, and I understand that, so thank you.
Yeah.
So,
We could bifurcate that out if the board wishes to have the ZBA consider that in 2 stages. That's fine.
yeah, I mean, that makes sense, and that's where I was kind of at, because if you get the ZBA grants the use variance, right, well, then we're going to get into the details of design, you know, the stormwater, wetlands on the property, the potential drawings for whether we flip flop, which we haven't gotten there yet, the garage with the buildings, whether there's one larger building versus the 2 6-unit buildings. There's lots of different options. And some of them may be based on the decision that the ZBA grants, right? You have to show financial need, right? And the financial need, when I look at, again, it's not for me to determine, it's not for this board, it's for the ZBA, and I know that, but it seems that ZBA could say, hey, you can recoup and make your profit with just 1 6-unit building or a 10-unit building, and that would change obviously the design based on where they end up of the property, which then would impact potential area variances. And then we'd have to go back and give the area variances for the design that we feel is the best thing to do. Obviously, no guarantees, but that makes sense. Is that kind of the process there? So we'll just strictly at the next meeting, just make a recommendation to the ZBA strictly on the use variance.
Yeah, I mean, if the applicant is okay with that, that would definitely be my recommendation because the site plan's so preliminary. Like I hate even talking about an area variance for the building that close to the adjacent single family homes when we already know there's a potential to flip flop that building over to the other side.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
I mean, is it worthwhile for the applicant so for me, that's a key concern, right? Where we putting that garage versus the building and the setbacks. So clearly the ZBA is going to see a set of drawings. They're going to see a set of setbacks identified, and it is going to beg a question with them. So although the issue in front of them will be a use variance, I mean, if it were us and we're looking ahead, like they look ahead, right? They'll definitely.
so there's actually 2 things. So there's 2 things that we would make a recommendation on the zoning board's looking. One, that the use isn't a permitted use, therefore a use variance is required. And then I think the second one is that they're asking for 2 additional primary structures.
Right.
So,
That's 2 additional uses.
no, it's just typically like in a residential or residential professional zoning district, you're just allowed to have 1 primary building. Like you're only allowed to have 1 single family home on 1 property. So if you're trying to build a second single family home, it triggers a use variance because you're not allowed to have multiple. So it's all tied in together, but just for the record, and the applicant has it pretty clear in his appeal that you have the use variance and then you have multiple buildings on that property with principal use.
So I think when we do make our recommendation at the next meeting, we would just take them as one, right? Because they're all really tied together. Is that,
Right. Unless, I guess unless for some reason at that time you already felt like 2 buildings was too much.
yeah, and
Or
I'll
2
be
additional
honest with you, I don't
Yeah.
think we're going to be able to get there before, next, because there's not much discussion tonight since the drawing hasn't been updated or anything. Again, but that's in the responsibility, I believe, to some extent of the zoning board of appeals based on the financial data provided, right? How much, they could
Well-
say only 1 building's appropriate. Is that a true statement?
For the use variance, when you're making your recommendation to the zoning board, to Patrick's question, like you're sticking to the comprehensive plan and, effects on the on the neighborhood, and then, your recommendation, which is a little bit more broad, but you wouldn't be recommending to the zoning board based on their criteria. You're going to recommend to the zoning board based on the planning criteria. But I mean, as far as if you're in favor of the project, because, Niskuna needs more housing. I think one of the things the CIC brought up is that increasing the density of housing with a smaller footprint is actually good environmentally in some ways. You may be in favor of the density or you may not, because you may be concerned that it's adding buildings too close to residential homes that, weren't built next to an R3 zone. So, I mean, you guys can weigh, but you have, I think, plenty of authority to review a project, under your normal planning, site plan type of review, that if you had concerns, you can lay them out in a planning board way. And then if, you did have a positive recommendation, you could explain why.
Yeah. Some of the other, past recommendations, whether it be, use or area variances, a lot of times we have a sketch plan that's approved that we've all negotiated and got to a point where we've agreed to it.
Yeah.
And then we make the recommendation on that. In this case, it's a work in progress that we're making a recommendation on, so it's a little bit more
Harder.
difficult.
Yeah, so do we have to actually rush it to the December ZBA?
Yeah, they are allowed that time frame, and they are put on that zoning board meeting. And like the applicant is given certain timeframes, by law that they have. So for sure, he is meeting those timeframes and is scheduled for the December zoning board meeting.
And to Mr. Khan's point was also something, thank you, that I was thinking about is that the ZBA, we want them to focus on what their requirements are for granting the use variance. I don't want them to get mixed up into the site plan review thinking that's the way it's going to be, the building here or whatever we have at that point in time. Because again, it's a work in progress, the wetlands haven't been delineated. I think they're going to be walked maybe next week or this week or something like that, so that could, physically change, the opportunity as submitted, where I stand personally, I'd like to see one building versus two. I don't know if, 12 units, my viewpoint is 12 units is too much, an additional 12 units. To me, 10 units maybe on to the north with the garage on to the south, it seems more appealing to me, but I'm, again, that's just my opinion. Everybody.
Yeah, so just one logistic thing, and I don't recall because we rarely ever do this, so I'll ask the question. Are we absolutely required to give the ZBA a recommendation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, it's perfectly, I think, fine if you're looking at it from a planning board perspective of what you've reviewed in the past, like how you feel the comprehensive plan, assesses, type of development like that in that area. And also just with your experience of adding multifamily, in neighborhoods, you can use all of that in your recommendation to the zoning board. Like Kevin, if you feel like 12 units is too much, then your recommendation to the zoning board would be, we want to work with the applicant on 6 units.
Well,
I'm from a planning board perspective, like
Yeah,
not from the financial hardship,
exactly.
like
It's
just
up
from a
to
planning board.
the applicant as,
Yeah.
as to, prove your case from a financial standpoint. I'm just saying what I would like to see as a planner, with no regard to, how much rents come in and how much money needs to be recuperated or maintained in order to run a successful business. I'm not looking at that. I'm just strictly looking at, where it's located and the impact to the neighbors and how I can minimize that is my,
I'll defer to Leslie because she's on the side, but I do have something to ask.
I remain very concerned about the density as the current layout we have. I can't support whether flipping the garage and the 1 unit changes that. I don't know. I'm still considering, since we don't actually have the plan, it's hard to evaluate it. One building with fewer units might make me more amenable to this proposal, but I remain very concerned about the density and the impact on the character of really a recently established neighborhood right there.
Yeah. In fact, I echo some of Leslie's concerns.
How about-
Not being able to see a plan before making a recommendation.
Maybe we'll see at the next meeting, but we won't have much time to
Right.
Well, I mean,
absorb it.
you have a
Laura,
plan.
could I ask a question?
Oh, sure, Claire.
I was just wondering, you mentioned the timeline from the applicant's perspective or right to a speedy review. Can they request to go to the January meeting if they felt it was in their best interest to better present their information, since they're basically pacing this process with their ability to update site plans and things, can they voluntarily say, I'd like to go to the January meeting instead?
They can voluntarily do so, but it should not be coerced by the board in any way. You have a plan before you, whether you
Yeah.
like it or not. And, you know,
I
if
don't
you
think this
don't like the
board is
density, then
coercing
you
anything,
put
by the way. We're just
density.
having a discussion.
Yeah,
Please.
yeah. I just want to be
believe me.
very clear about that. Like, if you're just like, well, we might do a positive recommendation if you make these changes,
No,
like, we
no,
don't want to go there.
No,
It's like,
of course not. And nobody said that. The
yeah.
board just make it clear. In fact, we still got a lot of opinions to hear from on the
Yeah.
board. Okay. So,
To everyone's point and kind of what Laura's saying, and hopefully to tie it all together, you'll make the recommendation. It'll go to the zoning board based on the use variance, and then it comes back and you guys get to work out all the details. So really what's being determined right now is, do they have the ability to put more than one multifamily unit on the property? And then what that looks like will come back to you guys before it goes back to the ZBA for the area variances. That's what we've worked out
yeah,
yeah.
here tonight.
yeah,
So
that's good. Yeah, that's good. I worry a little bit about, again, the plan where it's at now showing two buildings, and that's what the ZBA
So
sees.
Laura's also very good about putting in, when she does the recommendation, she puts in the discussion items too. So this discussion that's being had, I think, can be included as part of the recommendation to the ZBA so that they're aware of all of this.
but then I read that at the beginning of the meeting before any action actually occurs. I read the planning board recommendation into the record.
So if I could just follow up on that for a second, then, just for clarity. So I'm interpreting what Elena is saying is that it doesn't matter if they're applying for one additional building or two additional buildings or four additional buildings. The first issue to the ZBA relative to the use variance is, do they have that right at all, period, regardless of the number of buildings? Is that true?
Well, it's true to the extent that the use variance is, I think, at this point tied to two buildings. I mean, the zoning board could change it, but I think at this point, the planning board would want to make a recommendation on a use variance for two existing additional buildings of 12 units. Like, that's your recommendation. It's possible that if the zoning board does grant a use variance, it comes back to the planning board to review, that during site plan, the planning board can negotiate down. But if you negotiate down, well, it's not negotiate. I mean, if you have a legitimate planning board reason to require that the units go down, like say the traffic summary shows that if you have 10, I mean, unlikely, right? But if you have 10 units, there's no impact to Balltown Road. And if you have 12, there is. Then the planning board would probably have a legitimate right to be like, okay, you can only have 10 units, even though the zoning board had acted on 12. But I think generally speaking, once the zoning board says you can have a use variance in 12 units, like that's your as of right. The planning board is then working with that as of right. And then you'd have to do your normal planning board stuff. Like, okay, you are allowed to have that. Can we mitigate impacts? Where's the stormwater going? But, you couldn't be like, I don't like the density at that.
Okay, but it's allowed to have up to that many units. Is that correct? statement?
Correct. Once
Up to.
if the zoning board were to say yes, that would be what you would have to work with, like blank slate. Here's your site plan application for a multi-family apartment complex, and it is allowed to have an additional 12 units in two buildings. Like, if you need to change it based on site plan stuff, you can, but it's the same as even like subdivision. Like, you just have to make sure that you have reasonable, you're gonna have to have reasonable justification to make changes.
Well, Laura, given what you just said and the fact that we are waiting on a full wetland delineation, is that a factor that, let's say, the wetlands are much larger than the GIS source would indicate?
Yes, that would be a legitimate reason. Like, if for some reason the wetlands aren't delineated by the time they go to the zoning board, and then it comes back to the planning board for a site plan, and essentially the whole thing has wetlands. Yeah, I mean, the planning board could either they get a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers to fill those wetlands, or they may have to drastically reduce their buildings in order to comply with. But that's our code. That's our site plan code. That's our, stormwater and erosion and sediment control plan code. Those things are well within the planning board's purview to talk. So when we're looking at the plan now, we're looking at it conceptually, like kind of high level, comprehensive plan, impacts the community. Like, do we think that this makes sense for this parcel? What do we want to recommend to the zoning board? That kind of thing.
Right. Then just to be specific about what I said earlier, and then I'll, pause and let others speak. My concern wasn't about what the ZBA will decide. My concern was about what information and data we're able to look at with drawings, we're able to look at to make a proper recommendation. So if I had to make a recommendation for two buildings, then my recommendation might go one way. If I had to make a recommendation for a single building, that recommendation may go another way.
Mhm.
But without seeing that information, like, we're making that recommendation just for two buildings. It's the drawing in front of us.
Yeah, yep. And I would, I would encourage you to just, but, I mean, the applicant's listening, obviously, to this conversation, but unless he's volunteering one building, just be taking it as you see it.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's how I've been operating to date. We're
Mhm.
taking it as per the drawing.
Yeah, you have a drawing.
Yep.
And I just want to be clear, if we get to the next month's meeting and the board, for whatever reason, feels as if they don't have sufficient information in front of them to make an informed recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, we could certainly be amenable to extending out the schedule if that's what the consensus of the board is looking for at that point.
No, I think we can make an informed decision based on the drawing that's in front of us. So if that's all we've got to work with, I'm confident we can make an informed decision.
Okay.
May I ask the applicant, is it still your intention to rearrange the location of the buildings?
Absolutely. And I apologize. We just haven't been able to have our engineer produce that in the 2 weeks that have passed since the last meeting with the intervening holiday as well. We had tried to do that, but we were unsuccessful. So we were working on getting that to you this week.
That
Yeah.
certainly, seeking a setback on the northern boundary of the property is more palatable to me.
So a couple observations I had is that the two proposed buildings, the footprint's just over 3,700 square feet. Looking at the aerial view, and the planning board can also confirm this with some of the neighboring houses, they scale off at anywhere between 2,300 to 2,700 square feet with the garages. So if these are two independent, 6-unit buildings, they're not egregiously huge compared to what's on the surrounding area. And I do agree with a lot of other board members. I think a rearrangement of the parts, and specifically, like we've talked about before, the delineation of the wetlands may contribute to what that looks like. So as long as I think those things are being considered, these units aren't going to dwarf, at least in my opinion, some of the neighboring houses that are there. But again, there is a heavier southern boundary of a residential area. And if we could, be cognizant of that and just look at other design options of how maybe it shifts to the north, or that wetland boundary may even push it further or constrain it, I think those are going to be contributing factors to take a look at. So.
Can I just add one principled issue I just want to raise and preserve for the record? I believe in 2019, we received a proposal for a 24-unit development on this site. The board was unanimous and would decline to take it up. I want to make sure we don't allow for development by accretion. That is to say, the developer comes back, then it's 12-unit building, experienced hardship because of rates or other circumstances regarding the supply chain issues that right now we have a proposal that was 75% of the unit count of what was proposed in 2019. I think we should just have guardrails to prevent continuous rolling admissions of units based on projected hardships. That's just a concept I want to preserve and just note for the record.
Along those lines, I'm trying to conceptualize, density as it relates to this application and others that might be in a similar zone. In terms of the size acreage of a parcel as compared to, let's say, the new development up the street, the 3-story apartment building across from ShopRite, I'd be curious to know, number of units per acre as compared to this proposal. Do we have rough math on that we could,
Yeah, I could get you that. I think the applicant brought it up at the last meeting, and I can find you the numbers, but like the Knott Street West, Landing West building was zoned R3, but it, so they're allowed 10 units per acre, and it's 3.14 acres. And I think, think off the top of my head. They tried to squeak in an extra unit and we denied them, so they had to have sort of bigger apartments on the third floor. So I know that they didn't go beyond that grumpily. So yeah, so that they're essentially getting 10 units per acre. This one, I don't think they've maxed out their 10 units per acre, but it's
That
not-
it would
but it's
be
different zoning.
If it were maxed out, I think it would be 33 units and our total would be 18 at 3.3 acres for the lot.
Yeah, that's assuming no wetlands though, that the whole site is usable.
Yeah.
Correct. I'm just talking in the pure
Un-
density calculation.
Yep.
But
understand.
I mean, as far as multi-family density requirements go, like we could look at them. I think it's probably under a lot of them, but again, different zoning.
Not RP.
Yeah, because you can't have them in RP normally.
Are there other use variance exceptions in the town that come to mind?
For a multi-family,
Yes.
not that, no, we have done some use variances for medical buildings. The vet on River Road was a use variance. I think partly because our code didn't contemplate sort of the difference between taking care of humans and taking care of animals. But, yeah, I can look. I'll look, Patrick. Just off the top of my head, I don't know, but I'll look for you.
Yeah, this is definitely a unique situation, you know.
We don't get a lot. Mario's was a use variance because they were expanding their non-conforming restaurant building.
Because they expanded more than the 10% that they were allowed, right?
Yeah, I believe we had a use variance request for the midwifery to go into the single-family zone property on Route 7, but that one was withdrawn due to opposition. So we don't see them a lot. We don't get a lot of use variances.
Yep, I'm just looking at the denial here. Yeah, I mean, once, like I said, once the wetlands are delineated, you know, that's going to change the box, the design, and how things fit. And, you know, it may end at a point where maybe one building's the only thing that's going to work on the site, or two smaller buildings, you know, but we can't get there until we get there, right? So,
Yeah, I would recommend kind of just, I mean, a lot of times you guys have split recommendations, which is completely fine. When you do your split recommendation to the zoning board, Clark does a really good job outlining both the for and against, and that's completely appropriate. But like knowing, Leslie, but knowing knowing kind of where you stand on at least this application, you know, knowing that the applicant may change it a little bit by the next meeting, but you know, substantially the density and how it you know, would conform to the, you know, planning objectives of this board is probably not going to change. So I think it's okay for you guys to, you know, consider what you have before you time being.
I know that the ZBA hearing will be the first opportunity for the public to be heard regarding this project.
Which always happens, yes.
Yep, which is another tough thing. Has the planning office received any phone calls, emails, or anything regarding any concerns? Since obviously this has been posted on our website.
We have not, but without the mailouts, those applicant or the people who live there would have to be regularly watching the website or planning board meetings, which there are some, but that's not something that we see happen for the majority of residences in the town of Niskuna.
Yep. And the notification is 200 feet, 50 feet?
Yeah, it's, you know what? I'll have to double check. A use variance might be slightly more, but
I
normally.
believe it's 500 feet.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, Clark. So regular area variances are 200 and then potentially use variances are 500 feet. It's all.
Laura, as a follow-up to Chairman Walsh's question, has there been any, even before this new application has been in front of the board, has there been any concerns or comments from any of the single-family residences nearby as far as garbage, noise, anything of that sort?
For the operation of the new apartment building, well, it's not
The
new,
existing.
the renovated additional 3 units, we have not received any complaints. I do get the occasional compliment that the building looks very nice from the road now.
All right, good. All right, any other thoughts from members of the board or questions or comments for the applicant or for Planning Department? All right. All right, so hearing nothing else, I guess we'll continue to think about it, and we'll be prepared to make a recommendation to the ZBA at our December 12th meeting. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, thank you, everybody. Good discussion. That's why we had it under there. We want to make sure we don't wait to the last minute and have all this discussion when we're making our recommendation. All right, next up is 1851 Union Street. That's the Mohawk Golf Club. Application for subdivision sketch plan approval for 22 new single-family townhomes. I know Mr. McPartland will be recusing himself, and Ms. Gold will stay over there, but she will be taking his seat for the duration of this project. Okay?
Right.
How are you tonight? Good, good. The only thing I think we got is just wherever we left off last meeting, any comments, that
Oh, yeah.
any updates that you have?
So this is actually in the same boat as the previous application. It's simply too short. I mean, you essentially get like
Yep.
5 business days to turn stuff around. So they haven't updated their plans as yet, but they did go to the CAC. The CAC also had concerns about this project. Their concerns were listed. The CAC wanted to explore alternative sites to kind of offset this development in the Mohawk Golf Club. The one thing, and I mean, you can read them. The one thing that I wanted to note, which is kind of interesting, is that I know probably the zoning board is looking at reducing the area variances, and I know that you guys asked for ways to reduce potential area variances, but the CAC actually, wants to preserve as much green space. If, the proposal to go forward, they felt like maximizing the green space was very important to this development. And so they wanted to potentially kind of remove some of the privately owned green space and put it to the like the in common green space, so that it would be remaining green space. Because when you put the green space on private property over time, if a homeowner does feel like clearing that, there's nothing in our code that prevents them from doing that. If it's in joint ownership, you'd be much more likely to keep it as a green space.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to share with us tonight, or any updates at all, or just want to see if we have any questions for you?
Either really. I'm happy to answer any further questions. Just listen to your guys' discussion.
Any thoughts from the CAC?
Yeah, I think Laura did a good job summing up how they felt. I think that in general, they kind of liked this design. They like the minimized impact to the green space. And yeah, they were actually looking to perhaps reduce the size of some of the larger lots to give the common ownership that will be Forever Wild a little bit more space.
Okay. And Mr. Khan has agreed to be the project lead in this. Thank you, Mr.
Yep.
Khan. I don't know if you have any questions or.
So just one thing from what we heard on the privilege of the floor, you had mentioned the last time that you had meetings with the neighbors. Can you describe those meetings a little bit more? And
Unfortunately, I wasn't at those meetings.
Okay.
Bill was.
Okay, so maybe next time we can discuss that.
Well, one thing that we can do is, I believe there's handbooks, right, we know there are for traffic, right? I think one of the things we asked about and discussed was that
Right.
This could be 22 single-family homes that generates so many trips, AM, PM trips, right? And
Right.
townhomes generate a different number. I'm sure I could go look it up, but that's something you could provide to us, showing that I believe your position is that the 22 townhomes are less intense from a traffic standpoint than 22 single-family homes.
Definitely.
And for the public, in other words, comment, privilege of the floor, I believe you can also do the same thing from handbooks, saying townhomes versus single-family homes, what the impact on the schools. We don't get involved in the schools. I know that the planning office has discussions with the schools, at least try to get together yearly where they talk about projects that we have and make sure that they understand what's coming down the line for the future, so the school district can do their planning. But if you do have those numbers impact, it'd be just nice to have those for the public, okay?
Okay.
As far as anything else, I know you're probably going to take a look at the CAC comments and possibly adjust the drawing to maybe increase area variances for the lot size in order to change green space? Is that where you think you're going?
I don't think that we would really change this drawing very much. I think it would be, it actually probably wouldn't impact the variance at all to cut the size down to this lot, because this lot's already, it meets the lot area requirement by quite a bit. So we can actually cut a lot of that out, if that is the recommendation of the CAC, and it won't impact what the variances that we're requesting or the overall design.
Yeah, the traffic numbers might be something that the ZBA may be interested in also, Again, how do we stand on this one? Are we going to
Yeah,
make?
so this one is at sketch plan. So you guys have to work through sketch plan prior to them submitting a minor subdivision application that gets denied. So for sketch plan, what you need to do is either be okay with the sketch plan and do a resolution with sketch plan classifying it as a major subdivision. You would never be able to do a minor on this one.
Yep, mhm.
So this one has to be classified as a major. And then that would allow them to submit the major subdivision application and then go before the ZBA. And at that point, you'd be able to do your recommendation to the ZBA. If for some reason you were not in favor of the sketch plan, what you need to do is provide them written comments on the sketch plan that you would like to see changed for their next application.
Okay. This is the position of the applicant. This is the project you want to move forward, obviously. So we're going to have to act on this. That's all there is to it. There was lots of discussion about possibly widening the boulevard entranceway. And obviously, I know you didn't have time. We had a short cycle here between the meetings with the holiday and everything. Is the plan still to widen the boulevard to hopefully be able to address emergency access by having a wider boulevard?
So we can definitely look at that. I did take a look at the International Fire Code, which is also the same as New York's fire code in this section. With regards to fire apparatus access roads. And so this code, it states that for dead end fire apparatus access roads, which these are dead ends, obviously, you need a 96-foot circumference, or not circumference, diameter cul-de-sac to comply with this code. You're allowed to, the dead end is allowed to be up to 750 feet, which this meets both of those criteria.
You know what the approximate distance is and where you're measuring from, to and from?
Well, so I guess worst case scenario, if you're considering going up here and all the way down to a cul-de-sac, a dead end, really I would consider only one leg of the cul-de-sac to be a dead end.
No, you have to start from the road.
Yep.
So that is about 650 feet.
Okay. All right. So because of that, are you suggesting then that you would not widen the boulevard anymore?
We don't have to, according to the International Fire Code for fire apparatus.
That jives with our understanding from the planning department.
So the planning board has a section of code that basically encourages emergency access after 500 feet, which is what we've relied on. And it's been, policy for the planning board to create emergency access after 500 feet in some way. So ours is more restrictive than that code that he's citing.
Right. So I think it would have to be done relative to our code, right?
But that code, I think it's useful to know. It's meant to be able to like the reason the cul-de-sac is wider is because the fire engines, if they were to go down a dead end road that just stopped, like Middle Street, they can't turn around. So that code is meant so that they are able to, come in and leave kind of freely. And a lot of those codes are based on like how long their hoses can honestly reach once they've parked their vehicle somewhere. So it's good to know that information, but you do have a separate section of the subdivision code for 500 feet.
And that's why the thought was to satisfy the town, it's if the boulevard was wide enough that you had really two streets, basically, not saying full 24-foot wide streets, but two paths that is significant enough that if there was something that happened, that one was shut down, they would just go in the other way. And that's why we thought maybe our discussion was that if the boulevard were a bit wider, it would make us feel more comfortable for the emergency access, you know?
I guess, right now you got 20-foot wide lanes, so they are pretty wide.
Okay.
You can get two vehicles by
Okay.
in 20 feet.
Well, we did ask to see a configuration potentially that actually doesn't necessarily looks like that, that actually has better fire access.
Right, so you were
Alright, so-
thinking of a loop
Something,
configuration.
something. I mean, you're
And
the engineer,
And
yeah.
I did actually sketch up a loop configuration. And I didn't bring it. So this loop
If
here,
you turn that a little so that Leslie can see it too. Thank you. Can you see it now, Leslie?
so this loop here conforms to the minimum town standards for a radius of your road. It's got to be 100-foot radius on center. As you can see, this proposal, we can achieve a similar number of lots with a similar number of variances. I think there's 21 lots here as opposed to 22. So it's obviously not ideal for us. But as you can see, you're disturbing quite a bit more area. And you've got these lots in the middle, which are through lots, which are not very desirable, in my opinion. And, like I said before, you're disturbing about 25 to 30% more area to achieve this.
Okay. Thanks for making a drawing.
For our purposes, the lots in the center would be double frontage, or in some cases,
Yeah, they-
triple.
Right.
3 front yards. Yeah, they would be.
Now, I just did this quickly. The lot sizes are similar, but, with the frontage issues for the middle lots and the changes in shape, you might need a little bit more variances even.
So your primary requirement on making this drawing was actually the geometry of the loop from the
Right.
code?
I wanted to make the smallest possible loop road that we could.
Mhm.
What are the widths of the 2-axis roads in that drawing?
So in this instance, I didn't really get too much into particulars, but these are all 26 foot wide.
So 26 and 26 on that residential lot that,
Right. It's almost like you just got one long road that the entrances are just very close to each other.
Just for input purposes, I'd just like to renew my concern with a completely second access, that I don't know what the probability would be of a large access boulevard entrance being blocked, but stranger things have happened. And so I'm putting my 2 cents out there. I still would like to see another access someplace else, and I'll be quiet about it now.
Yeah, and if there is another access, it doesn't have to be, a road. It can be like, just an access point off of the cart path, something that would, as long as it would handle an emergency vehicle with a grass mat, so it wouldn't even be visible, just maybe it'd be markers or something like that. I think we talked about that at the last meeting, but I think there's, I don't know if you have thought, give any more thought. But
Would be something. I don't really know how we would make it work, but you kind of got golf course, all here.
So today, if there's an emergency in the golf course on the green itself, how does an ambulance get there?
It wouldn't. You'd take someone off on a golf cart to where they could be reached by an ambulance. That's just my
Yeah, I
opinion.
mean, I think the ambulance could go down the cart path to get as close as
The
possible.
there are some paved
Yeah,
paths
there are some,
that
because
an
I mean,
ambulance could definitely drive on.
Yeah.
I've driven on it. But if someone was,
So is that like a pre-existing use thing, or is that within code?
That I don't know that offhand. Like how they would rescue someone on a golf course, I would definitely defer to the fire chief. I can ask him.
Yeah, please,
But-
if you don't mind, Laura.
Yeah, because I imagine that does happen. I mean, it's got to. There's people on there fairly regularly.
The other thing we heard at Privilege of the Floor, you were here, the question of why, why at this location? Maybe Mr. Sweet needs to answer this for you. It's up to you. But versus coming off, I guess it would be Balltown Road, I think is what the person at Privileged Floor was talking about, and moving this whole project.
Yeah, I'm not sure what location he was referring to, but this is the most practical area. That's why.
Yeah, so I guess in general, the question is there another area on the golf course that could sustain this subdivision?
No, not that's undeveloped like this.
You would theoretically have to like move a golf course hole, right? Like
Right,
I think he was saying like, why don't you put it close to the clubhouse
sure
clubhouse thing? But you would have to move golf course holes, right? And
Right.
yeah.
And obviously, it's an opportunity for the golf club since they purchased that residence. If you didn't have the residence, this wouldn't work,
So
Access.
could I just ask, just to follow up on that question? I missed last week's meeting, my apologies. You have site control in 1245 Ruffner? It's dependent upon that acquisition?
It's owned. Yeah, it's already owned by the golf course.
It's already owned by the
Yep.
golf course. Thank you.
For sketch plan approval, maybe the question for Laura, at what level do we need? I mean, it's a work in progress as far as the boulevard, I guess is more what I'm thinking about, and any details for emergency access. Could sketch plan approval just be the layout that's shown, and then, as we get into the engineering and details, modify as required?
Yeah, you do sometimes significantly modify a sketch plan, but you'd have to be, I think, okay, generally with the concept of the 22 units
Yeah.
and, the sort of dumbbell configuration there. Like, I think if you could refine it, but I think if, for sketch plan, you'd either be like, yeah, that's close. Now you can go to the zoning board to look for your air variances, or if you think maybe reduce some of the lots, change the road, that type of thing, then you might want to put in writing to them to change that and then look at a new sketch plan. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah. That's $1 million question. So how do we feel about this plan? I mean, I'm okay with the design under some concerns from other board members. I think, we'll have an opportunity if it goes forward through the ZBA for taking a look at the style of the townhomes. So I think we can get through that. I think if the boulevard concept, personally, I think since it says 20-foot wide in each lane, I mean, that's pretty good size. I think a standard town road is 24, I believe, if I'm correct. So, I mean, you're almost at 2 roads going in. So from an emergency standpoint, I think my take is that the boulevard should be able to handle that. I think, obviously it's zoned R1, so you could put 22 single-family homes here. It would be a greater impact to the community since they would be all 18,000 square foot lots. And it could be compliant, I would assume, so it wouldn't need to go to the zoning board of appeals. But I don't think, I think 22 single-family homes would be worse for the residences that live near this project and for the community from all sorts of aspects, just, green space, encroachment on the people that live there already. This configuration gives a good buffer between the existing homes that we might not be able to achieve with 22 single-family homes. So and again, that's just my thoughts. I'm trying to throw that out there for discussion. If people disagree or have concerns with that, please let me know.
Question, it would be a public road,
Yes.
so maybe we should get input from Ray on that.
Yeah, or the fire and police also, of course.
Yeah.
like we
Yeah,
always do.
I'll do.
Whichever
I
They'll get
was
there
going to ask
eventually.
Dale about the emergency.
Yep.
So I'll ask him.
Yep.
I'm okay with this layout as long as those other entities are. I didn't like the little loop, and I had in my head designed a bigger loop, but it would have had all the houses facing the road and none of them facing each other, which did not seem at all neighborly to me. And this really is just going to be a little community.
Anybody else thoughts about the sketch plan, concerns?
This is probably beyond the scope and authority of the planning board, but one issue to kind of articulate and think about it is that if this is in furtherance of support of the economics of the golf club, I think there's a benefit there because obviously there's a much larger site in play for consideration. So I guess what I'm articulating is I want to make sure that this supports the overall economics for the durability and sustaining member for this enterprise. So what we don't see in another 15 years is the larger golf club go under and go for sale, right? And it goes on the market. I think it's a larger question, a much more complicated one. I think it's, I don't know if it's beyond the authority of the board, but it's just something to think
Yeah.
about and have it articulated.
Especially when it's a function of membership, right? And so on and so forth, which we, can't-
Right, which
nobody
is,
can control, and who knows what the future
Yeah,
holds.
but it's not,
you know?
yeah, it's,
I mean, there's a bunch of variables which can't be controlled, but clearly this is of great interest.
And something the comprehensive plan
I
committee
was
can
gonna
take a
say
look
that,
at.
yeah. Mhm.
yep, yes, we
Exactly.
don't want to.
I think they have in the past, but I think more so than ever, right?
And another plus, I don't know the golf course at all. I don't play golf and I've never been out on the golf course itself. But another plus is that this is enough away that people won't have the golf balls coming in on their windows and whatnot. Just have it pulled a little away from the actual course is good.
Just for everyone's reference, one of the speakers, Mr. Horowitz here that gave his address, scaling from the back plus or minus where that house is to the townhome on, which would be number 5, is approximately 275 feet. So I can't scale on that, but it's a pretty considerable distance, and this is a heavily wooded area. Again, I'll just reiterate, the townhome concept seems to be fine. I would look for a lot of diversity, not just 2, probably more like 4 or 5. Not dominating forward-facing garages, and also getting some distance between the 2 driveways, only because the proximity of 2 driveways, even though they are going to be solely for use for each townhome, you know how it is when the pavement meets. Someone's going to park a little too close. They're going to get visitors over. If there's separation between them, or a bank of these maybe have a side entrance, you've got some that have some more generous side areas that you can get around. Again, I'm just in the architecture review board is also probably going to weigh in on a lot of the aesthetics on this. They have the ability and the opportunity to make some really, really good looking townhomes here that do not look like the first version that we saw.
Right.
And I know we're not married to those, but again,
Yeah.
I'm going to really, really drive this home on making these really complementary buildings. So, ultimately whoever works on these, if it's particularly Vettel developers, if they have someone in-house that does it, go down Ruffner Road, take a look at the architecture that's there, has to complement or be better than what's there.
I agree.
And these pocket neighborhoods can be really nice, like adding a boulevard, landscaping it. I think there's going to be a couple of questions for the for the town, at least with having no parking on the boulevard because of the width of it currently right now. So if that's the case, there may be some signage that we're not really going to be keen on seeing. So maybe widening the boulevard in order to accommodate a parked car or something should be considered.
Yeah, good point.
There's just a few of these things I think that we'll work through, like on the sketch plan. And thanks for bringing the loop drawing too. I think that just we as a board need to see those things
Right.
to not say what if. And the other thing too is I understand where the detention ponds are. The topography is down in that area, so not barbelling this and keeping a trapezoidal section to that northeast side is understandable. So again, I would just try to look at the way these townhomes are configured and that layout and get some diversity in there.
Definitely. I mean, we want it to look good too, and we're definitely open to changes in footprints. It's not going to affect our area variances. If we have a house be a certain shape, or even if we do have the garage on the side, we can make that work.
Yeah. A lot of people walk in this neighborhood, and they walk on the road, and they're going to walk through this area. I think that's the other thing, that when you have that link to the golf cart path, it's going to have some signage there so people don't start. The neighborhood's going to use it as a link to come up and through, or if there's a way to maybe border it and bring it back around or something. I don't know. There's just some amenities there that could be capitalized on. And then there's other things that are going to be solely for the benefit of the golf course that should be very well articulated that that's not for public use.
Right.
Yes, no, Dave, I'd like to comment regarding the parking, because that's, talking about emergency access, we're saying, hey, the boulevard could serve the purpose if it's
Right.
designed properly. But if you park, especially the one home, the driveway is going to be relocated from Ruffner to the new boulevard, correct? It has to be.
Right.
So now if they have, friends over and they all park along the boulevard, you may, impact the emergency access. So maybe that one side needs to be wider than the other side and allow parking on that side, and the other side, no parking, because there's not a home that has a driveway on that side.
Right. So we did, purposely not have any homes fronting on the boulevard. And over here too, we did make sure that where this driveway is going to be relocated, it's not divided. It's just going to be kind of one big
Oh, okay,
wide
that's right.
area.
Yep, it's before the division occurs.
So-
Yeah, you can see there. But just to be clear, the existing home there on 1245 will stay, right? The house,
No.
or is that,
Not at 1245. The one at 1247 will have its driveway located.
okay.
The house that they own is going to come
It's
down
gonna-
in order to support
okay.
this
Oh,
proposal.
yeah, that's what I thought originally, but I'm
Yeah.
just looking at this drawing and,
All right.
Doesn't that house currently have a side loaded driveway?
It does.
Yeah. So I think they're just reconfiguring
Mhm.
that connection.
Yep. Yep.
And if you do extend that median down, they've got to either skirt around it
Yeah.
or go all
Can't
the
have
way.
that.
I live on a boulevard, so I know. what it's like.
Yeah.
No, that works. Works as long as they don't park, to the top of the drawing,
Right.
on the driveway and then shut off the boulevard. And that's be the emergency concern, because then now you only got one way to get in with a large vehicle. So we just have to make sure there's room there, part of the design, okay?
And the only other question I had was where the house is being removed, there's currently just a green space shown on Ruffner Road.
Right.
Is there any, besides the sign that would go there, is there any other landscaping amenities that would be added there?
We could really do, whatever. We're open to any suggestions to put there. Something nice.
Yeah, that's actually why I brought it up, because one of the other things for sketch plan that I want you guys to think of. So generally speaking, I mean, I think it's consistent that the board, is at this point trying to protect and preserve green space. So they have looked at the possibility of townhomes instead of single family homes multiple times. The zoning board said no last time, but the planning board, I think, was supportive of reducing the size of the lots to support the townhomes. But it's something very different, because typically when we look at subdivisions, there was preconceived access to that parcel.
right.
This is a situation where at least two homes have lived next to a single family home for the entirety of the existence of their homes, and that a single family home is being removed to put in a road. So I do think that that's really important to discuss at sketch plan. And I do think this is not a typical case where we can say there was a stub, sorry.
Right,
Like,
right.
we as a planning board, like, we put these stubs in to put people on. I mean, that is not the situation here. So I think that's really important if you're going to look at potentially adding a road where there was a home, that you do like as much exploration and massive mitigation to the adjacent homes that are now going to be corner lots. I
Right.
do think that that is a significant change to the neighborhood that you would have to review during sketch plan.
Oh,
Yep.
well, I mean, as far as sketch plan, I mean, if you're talking about, planting trees or, greenery.
That would all be worked out.
Yeah, that'll all
Yeah,
be worked out in the
later.
future. One of the things I think, I don't know if that's correct, to consider the magnitude or the details of those changes, because we still haven't heard anything from the public either yet. Because, I mean, there was some discussion, I don't know if it was here or at this board, but about maybe having some kind of a public space there. Well, public may not want a space there. Like you said, these two homes that didn't have a road between them may not want to have a pocket park or benches or anything next to them. They just might want to have the roads and some trees to shield it and nothing.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to hear from the public sooner or later as part of this process, but I'm sure we will,
Yeah, but we don't get to hear from the public before.
Right.
No, not for
No,
sketch
yeah,
plan.
not for
Like you said,
sketch plan.
plan.
Yeah.
Sadly, we
So that'll
we're
be-
very
the
ZBA will be the
for
first time.
subdivision. Again, it's just a weird process because you guys can't call for a public hearing on a subdivision until after you've done seeker. You can't do seeker until after an application is complete.
Understand.
And the application is not complete
So
unless it
it's
gets area variances from the zoning
Right,
board.
and that's when
Yeah.
we'll work on what the neighbors would like to see there.
Yeah, and Laura, I'm glad you raised what you raised because it's weighing on my mind too ever since first seeing the application, right? There is, and the gentleman who spoke in privilege of the floor mentioned it, right? There is no expectation in this neighborhood that there could ever be a development back there, that there would ever have been one back there.
Yeah, I mean, not
Right.
holistically, right? Because
Right.
it's a line of homes. So this
Yep.
is something the planning board hasn't ever seen before where a home is taken down and a road is put in.
Right.
So I think you have to, tread carefully there. And I understand that the landscaping and the mitigation would be after sketch plan, but I do think that the actual
No.
like access point, like how close it is to Mountain View Ave, like those things should
Yep.
probably be taken into consideration during sketch plan.
Yeah, that's why we had talked a little bit about the last time. If you move, further north on that property, right? If you, just were able to link the road up to the existing road that's there, right? But you said don't have the topology to support that, right?
The existing road that's there.
This is on you won't see it in this drawing. It's further north of
Oh,
where,
you're talking about,
yeah,
oh, okay.
yep.
Yeah,
That,
the
that
one-
little area there where they said that, the kids
The
sled down
sledding
under
hill.
the snow.
The sledding hill.
Yeah.
By Linwood. But
So I was a little surprised at a previous application, we had a variety of homeowners come out on a much smaller subdivision. I heard you say that there had been public meetings of some sort conducted by the owner?
right,
You just weren't there.
I wasn't there, but
Will there be more meetings conducted by
I
the
think
owner?
there's been a few already. They mailed out letters to basically everybody on Ruffner Road.
Could you just, for my benefit, just articulate what was done, just so we're just stated on the record to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, there was a positive discussion.
No, but letters were mailed. Letters were mailed. You said what else? What else occurred?
The letters were mailed, and there was a meeting, I believe, at the golf course.
Okay.
For anybody who wanted. to come.
Possibly two.
Yeah, there was two.
Okay.
I know at least actually.
I didn't
Thank you.
attend any, just for the record either. I mean, but it's just sweet. I think he mentioned it last time. I think there was two, is what he said.
Yeah.
Right.
So in any case, the only recourse the public has prior to the ZBA's public hearing is privilege of the floor, right? Okay. So yeah, look, just a couple of things to be precise on the fire access again. So I agree. Thanks for making a loop drawing. That seems to maybe be something that'll put into the margins for now. But is there a version that gives you that 500 foot? Can you work up a version that gives the 500 foot access to the dead end?
So I'm not really even aware of that section of the code that we're.
So that's something Laura and Clark can help
I'll
with,
have
right?
to.
I'll send it to you when I find it.
All right.
It isn't a requirement. It's a recommendation. It's not
Understood.
as strong as you think.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has been policy by this
Mhm.
board pretty strongly and standard for a
Right,
while.
and we try, we did it at.
Well, I mean,
Elks Farm,
precedent's an important thing for us.
Right.
And so that's,
And that's why, again, the discussion about the boulevard, is that adequate? That's why it's important to hear back from fire emergency, because if the wider boulevard alleviates those concerns, that's one way of addressing.
I mean, the fire chief will ask what the distance is, right?
He doesn't weigh in on planning issues, but he'll tell you what he needs to respond in an emergency.
Okay. And the one other thing, which is going to be a new topic, you mentioned it, the issue with the water main.
Yeah, so I don't have my thing. A couple of things I don't know that they're necessarily important for sketch plan, because sketch plan is looking at kind of the lot configuration and some of those other details. But as far as sanitary sewer and water line goes, I know Bill had talked about them finding a bigger water main. I would have to double check with Matt. I know originally he was concerned about them connecting into a certain pressure zone.
Right.
And I don't know if the bigger main is on a different pressure zone. And also this sanitary sewer feeds into a line that is already, is my understanding, like maxed out. Like I think it's the same as the Kelts Farm line. So like that type of analysis, like what our systems can take or what needs to be mitigated would have to happen.
Kelts Farm, I forgot whether it was water or sewer. Which one did they replace? It was
It replaced the sewer line.
the sewer line, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So potentially the same thing might need to happen here.
Well, so with Kelt's Farm, what was happening was there was essentially like a 90-degree angle in the sewer line, and the sewer line runs pretty much full all the time. So when it was like a rainstorm or something very extra, that bend was essentially backing the sewage up and causing problems in adjacent
Right.
homes there. And so what he did
He
was
straightened it out.
he took the 90-degree and he made it like much more normal.
Right, right.
And upsized the line, although he was only upsizing it, for probably like 500 feet,
Yeah.
but still makes a really big difference. Like just removing that 90-degree bend and some of the construction in that line was very helpful. And they also, I think at the time, worked with DEC to show some infiltration was removed at the time because that old sewer line was in a wetland. So they were able to say, okay, that was like a clay tile sewer pipe thing in a wetland, and now we're building this new one without the break. So I think that was, but this one I think will have to show somehow because that line is full when it gets close to River Road.
Yeah, I mean, and it's clear that it's not necessary for what we need to look at for sketch plan, but I would like us to at least be able to know and the applicant to know what the potentialities could be.
Yeah, it's
Right,
not
or I
gonna
should
be,
say
like,
the
super
eventualities.
easy to tie into those utilities right now. The water one I'm not sure about because of the new information that was given to us.
Right.
The sewer line I know is hard.
Yeah, our record shows that from a water perspective, there's a 6-inch pipe there, right? That's what our
Right,
record
but
shows.
I think he said
He
he found
said-
a bigger one.
No, yeah, I remember that from the last time. So we'll need to get definitive on that, right?
Yeah, yep. Mhm.
So just for the board's reference, I don't think there's any specific language in the current comprehensive plan about specifically removing buildings for road access
There is,
development.
yeah.
But there is language in there that does talk about, I guess the best way to explain this would be like taking two lots and combining them and taking scale out of a neighborhood, knocking down two smaller homes to build a larger home, redevelopment of smaller lots to have a house twice the size on it, things like that. So Ms. Robertson brought up a very, very good point that this is going to be a pretty dramatic change to a chunk of houses in that neighborhood that are going to go to corner lots. And that's not something I'd really considered in the previous meeting, but I think that that's really got to be taken under consideration here with how we're looking at access. And the other thing too is if municipalities come back, I would say you might want to have a backup plan for a second means of egress. And if that means right now just diagramming how you would get over to Linwood, maybe that's how it has to be because that is probably the next closest cut. And I know that there's that very steep hill with the tee boxes, but that is bookended by two residential homes currently.
Yeah, so David, my thinking was not as clear and crisp last time when I asked that question about Linwood, but in the back of my mind, putting a road where a house is was, the hazy motivating factor for that question back then. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you could raise a hill, right? I know there's water and drainage issues there, but it depends on every problem can be engineered, right? You can talk to the owner of Kelt's Farm. He'll tell you clearly.
Dave, that's a good point, that the two lots that are there now by construction of the boulevard, those would be, have two front yards. Would that do we know if they have accessory structures that would be made non-conforming as a result of putting the boulevard in?
I haven't done that analysis.
Yeah, you say that's something we're gonna have to take a look at also. So
I don't think there's any.
So if they have a pool or a shed or something,
Or front yard setbacks.
Um,
The one is definitely not going to be a front yard
yeah,
setback
this
issue.
guy,
The closer one, I don't know.
but also
They'd be
that,
grand person
this-
anyway.
this house here, he's already actually on a town right away. It's a 20-foot.
It's an easement. It was an easement that the town used to access its water tower. I don't consider it to be a right of way, and it wasn't 60 feet. It was like
No, it's 20 feet. But when you look at the tax map, it looks like a right of way. It's a blank
it
space.
looks like maybe an alleyway, but
Right,
definitely
right.
not a road stub.
No.
And it's an access easement to water utilities. I definitely do not agree with the characterization that there is a pre-existing road type of notification to residents on there.
Thoughts, board, comments?
Mr. Rapino, could you just unpack for me, what are you talking about Linwood? I'm looking on Google Maps. You want to just have a second means or the primary means as a backup?
If emergency services came back to say, we definitely need to have some sort of secondary access point.
Right.
How would that be achieved if the golf course did not want that transversing down over, I guess would be like hole 14 down back towards the clubhouse? The only other route would be to come out where Linwood meets the top of Ruffner, almost at the point of
Yeah.
where the property is.
Well, there's actually one other
And that's
place.
that's just emergency access, what you're saying.
Oh.
Strictly if they had to have a second point to get in and out.
Dave, can you just point out sort of to the south? Yeah, there's an actual platted right of way
Okay.
to the south, which is 60 feet but not improved, which sort of almost connects into that top road of Country Club, like right at the end of that green
Yep.
there. He just pointed to it with his finger,
Uh-huh.
with his finger. There is a platted right of way there. Those homes, even though they are not seeing a road, are currently legally a corner lot.
Okay, that's
Okay.
good to know. I didn't know that before, so I'm glad we're having this discussion. I'm just
So
bringing up
that
Google
would come
Maps.
out, you could point
So
right, okay, right there. All right.
yeah, it would just be, I mean, I know that you guys have explored them, but I do think for sketch plan, it's important to at least look at what the alternative
Uh-huh.
entrances would be without removing a home. That's
Uh-huh.
obviously going to be a question that's going to, I mean, I think it's a planning board question anyway, but I do think that you need to be able to at least have explored those options because you also want to be careful about setting precedents of removing homes for right of ways.
Any other thoughts or comments?
Wait, Laura, just complete your thought though. So you're saying Country Club Road is,
Yeah, I'll bring it up.
I mean, I've got it on Google Maps.
Oh, you do?
That
Okay.
corner lot is
Where East Country Club Drive meets South Country.
it looks like it's 1218 South Country Club Road. Are you saying that
Oops. Okay, wait.
potential road connector there? Is that what you're?
So, I also bring this up because the Complete Streets has been trying to get a multi-use path connection here for as long as they can remember. And I know that golf course has been resistant to putting a Complete Streets connection here, but I do think if you're doing impacts to the community, they definitely need to mitigate and help connect these different neighborhoods together. Oops, sorry. Let me just pull it up. I'm going to change it to like pink or something so you can see it.
That's right here. That's right here. Okay, yeah, right, so.
So currently they're talking about this little tiny kind of like alleyway up here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Down here, there's a platted right of way. These two homes exist as corner lots, and it's very close here to this East Country Club Drive. So what the Complete Streets Committee has been asking is to kind of pop into the golf course and make a multi-use path just along this tiny section of the golf course over here, like up in here, because this is town owned, you know, so if you could just get that tiny little section, you could get every single person in East Country Club Drive safely over into the Ruffner Road neighborhood. Like right now, they have to go down onto Rosendale. So that would be like a really critical connection because there's a ton of homes in East Country Club Drive that are currently totally cut off from kind of any walking access over to Ruffner Road. But I mean, another thing, just so that you know, like maybe look at entering on Linwood and look at entering on here. I know that they
Yeah.
did some preliminary work on entering here and it may still have some problems, but I definitely think, you know,
And you're referring to the slope and the problems is the slope that you guys referred to.
no, I
over
think
by
the
Linwood,
problem
right?
on this side was that
right
it
here next
impacts
to
the
the
golf. It impacts the green.
Yeah, there's really no, I don't think there's much of a grading issue there. It's more the golf course doesn't want a road right up against their green. Neither do the neighbors. The neighbors don't want the road right in their backyard either.
The golf course is the applicant here, so. Just point it out right away one last time, Laura. I'm looking at it here.
Yeah, it's right here. He's actually got it on his map. You just can't see it too
Yep,
well.
yep.
If you want, I can come closer.
No, it's okay. I got it. I'm looking at it here.
Yeah,
locally.
it's right.
Just wanna
It's
see.
right here.
I'm just counting the houses to see which one it's between.
How wide is that, Laura?
I believe it's 60 feet.
So is an option, one way in there and out the other,
Yeah, it's 60 feet.
other side? Is that another option?
I mean, it's just something to look at. We just hadn't discussed it too much because I think we were still looking at, townhomes.
I mean, you gotta have enough room there to not interfere with the green.
Well, you might not be on the green, but you're going to be very close to it.
That's okay. Consol and North Colony Golf Club, you could literally throw something out of your car window and throw it onto the green. Not that I've ever done that.
Well, at least, I think you should at least, talk to Mr. Sweet and it's about all these different options, why and why not, to summarize them for the board,
Gee, Laura,
No,
keeping all
we
this.
have
Yeah,
discussed
and I know,
this,
yeah.
this particular.
So like this one, is there a way that, say, you just go in this way and come out between the house, and that way you got 2 points of access, and it could be one way in and one way out?
I mean, I think the bottom line is the golf course and the neighbors. And I think this is actually something that was brought up at the community meeting, is they don't want a road, right next to the green and right behind someone's backyard.
Yeah.
It's only 60 feet.
And it's an existing right of way, right? Whoever's living there,
True.
Yeah, that's the big difference.
You're living-
As Laura stated, they already have 2 front yards legally, so they don't have an impact
Yeah.
by putting the road through, just that they,
Well,
obviously the impact will
But
be
then
the
the road's
road.
got to curl
Yeah,
around.
and then obviously the impacts, you got a road next to your house, but it legally, it's,
Highly, highly recommend, even if that situation for the road doesn't work out there, that the planning board push very hard for a complete streets connection. The golf course does not want to do it. It should be done.
And that, but that would not be the same as a road.
No, I
I
mean, I think you should explore all access to that parcel.
Path.
Yeah,
Right,
but whatever access is decided on, if the sketch plan does move forward, I do think that you need to discuss the complete streets connection that was recommended there.
well, if this were to go forward, there'd be either be a parkland fee for each unit or a payment in lieu of parkland or
Yeah,
some
because they're
combination.
not setting aside public.
Right, or
yeah.
some combination of those we've also done, right?
gee, Laura, I wish you brought up that access point last week, but I'm glad you brought it up now. I mean,
Talking a lot about
yeah.
sort of single family versus
No, I meant the right of way that exists there. So, I mean, ideally for me, it would be awesome if the entrance, if one entry exit point is that right of way and the other one is over at Linwood.
Well, if you take that back.
It's no longer a dead
talk
end.
about
It takes care of a whole bunch of fire issues.
Done.
I understand it coming close to the green, but like I said, we can look at other golf courses.
I think that, well, the point, that's why we had the discussion tonight, right? We'll talk about these things. You can go think about those. We won't be taking action for sketch plan at the next meeting because of discussion we had tonight. Come on back, with your thoughts about what you heard tonight, and once you consult with Mr. Sweet or wherever you need to, right? And then we'll see where we'll land. And if we're closer, then we'll call for sketch plan probably in January would be my guess. Does that seem reasonable to everybody?
Yeah, that sounds fine. I mean, we have things to work through.
Yeah, and then obviously if we get there in January and then it would be later in January at the soonest that we'd make a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, right? I don't know what the timetable you have, but it seems like that's probably the best we're going to be able to do at this time of the year, especially with only one meeting in December.
Yeah. So I don't mean to belabor it, but just since we have everybody here, either question to Laura or to, I think you know a lot about this, Chris. Where does water issues on Rao and, where on the map, like where do they start developing?
The top of Route, but the water isn't felt by the residents at the top of Route as much as it is toward the bottom of Route as you go downhill. But even then, I don't know if, I think the work that was done, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago to remediate the swelling of water at the bottom of Route, I think it has improved it.
And by bottom of Rao, topologically, you mean by where it hits the golf course, right?
Yeah, where
Yeah.
the golf.
It's, I
the
mean,
southern-
the map, the southern part, yeah.
Is
Yeah.
much higher than as you go north on Route. right?
Yeah, so there's like a detention pond right in here, and then there's essentially like a kind of a gully that runs
Mhm.
between the backyards of the Row Road and the Ruffner Road people. It's sort of collecting water all through here, and it becomes a major issue when you get down to like where like Vincenzo is coming in and Antonio. Like this is where that we've had some flooding issues
Yeah.
right through here, and then it goes into a culvert over there. So in one sense, you would definitely want to make sure, because this is kind of above that area, that this doesn't shed any more water, because you know already that that there's downstream issues.
Mhm.
But it's not directly related to it, but it does shed water in that direction.
Mhm.
So he would definitely, as normal with the SWIP, show that they were making it equal or better, and better
Right.
would be better.
Right.
I mean, another thing in the back of my mind is, I'm beginning to think about, is it possible to level that grade on that hill at Linwood?
It would
What's the
be-
implication? Well, I know it's possible to do it. I'm just asking about what the implication is on the downstream.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a normal question to explore the alternatives, right? I mean, it may be that they're not feasible, but they should be explored, or at least the exploration needs to be showed to the planning board.
It's essentially the same exercise you just did by showing the big racetrack.
Yep.
That,
Right.
I think in consensus, we've pretty much agreed that that's not a better solution. So
Right.
I know in the previous meeting, I was critical of the cul-de-sacs. I'm not a huge fan of them. And on a previous development, we ended up with a road that snaked through that had one ingress point and egress point that was the same. It has an emergency access, but it was limited to just one cul-de-sac in there. So, I mean, this will evolve, but I think at least by the next meeting, if we can see that overlay of those road connections
Mhm.
and be thorough with the hardships, if it's topography,
Right.
if it's simply shortening a tee box or something, okay, golf courses are reconfigured all the time, whether a planner comes in to make the course harder or easier, or devastation from a storm, they get reconfigured. And if it means shifting some things a little bit, maybe that's the result for a larger gain for them for the townhome project.
Okay.
Good. Thanks, Dave. Good comments. Everybody, good comments. Appreciate the discussion.
Thanks, team. Yeah.
All right, so we'll get you on the agenda for December 12th. Hopefully you can give us some feedback from what we talked about tonight at that meeting, and we'll just take it from there.
All right. Sounds good.
No,
Thanks.
We appreciate your time. Thank you. All right, and the last discussion item for tonight is 1515 Hillside Ave. That's site plan application for the new signage at Hillcrest Village Apartments. And I know we have the applicant, hopefully still online, Mr. Crawford. Thank you for hanging in there with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Yes, I am here.
Yep, beautiful. I think could you just give us a quick overview of what's changed since the last time we saw you? I think I don't want to do it for you, but where you're at.
Yeah, well, sign 2 was revised based upon all the comments, and this seemed to be the best solution. The wording west buildings was added, and the numbers are larger versus the first iteration that we showed you. I'm looking at it on my screen here. So all the 0 numbers are west buildings, and at the top of sign 2, it says west buildings now with the arrow. And then sign 4 was revised to include east buildings. And these are all the buildings that are 5s. So you'll have, it indicates the leasing center, and then it indicates east buildings, and they're all the 5s. And they are the 2 main changes.
Okay. And the waivers required are still the same. They haven't changed the size of the signs at all. I know that we.
Right, sign 2 is the 3x4.
Right.
And the leasing center sign is still the original. And we're asking for the benefit of removing the wall sign, so the net sign area was reduced at the leasing center.
Right. Yep, so waiver of 8 square feet for the directional, for the first directional number 2, and for number 5, 4 square feet needed. Again, with the leasing sign that was on the building being removed. So, thank you, Mr. Crawford. So that's kind of where we're at with this. I know we've, took a time out from this so the applicant could go think about it, but it's back in front of us and the board's, I guess I'd like some feedback from the board. Are we ready to have a resolution on this? I mean, I'm good with it.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a, improvement from.
Yeah. It's an improvement. And I think it was Ms. Gold's comments, and I appreciate those being more explicit. I don't have a problem with the size of the signs. The signs are already there. It sounds like the verbiage will change on them, but still the same size sign. And I don't see any issues with them personally.
I do like the addition of east and west.
Yes.
I wasn't sure about it until I saw it, but I do think that helps.
Yep. Okay. Any concerns from the board? We have a resolution next meeting approving this package? Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Anybody not okay with that? Okay. All right. Mr. Crawford, thank you again for waiting in there. We'll have a resolution at our December 12th meeting for this as submitted tonight for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Not a problem.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Mr. Crawford. Okay. All right. So that's it for discussion items tonight. You have anything, Ms. Robertson, regarding reports?
No, I forgot to put it on the agenda, but I did email you guys the calendar. If anybody had any, can you, if you need me to email it, let me know, but take a look at it.
Is that the final?
I mean, unless you have any issues, I can put it on for kind of like a verbal adoption in December if you want me to.
Yeah, why don't you put it on again, include it in the packet for December?
I'll do that.
I had no concerns, but everybody's holidays sometimes are different than mine, so everybody take a look at it. And again, if we make a boo-boo, we can always try to adjust it throughout the year if there's something that conflicts, so. All right, we'll vote on that, do a show of hands at the next meeting on the calendar for 2023. All right. Anything else tonight, Laura or Mr. Henry, for reports?
Not unless you guys had specific questions.
No, it's next.
Laura, could you just ask, just to speak to Mr. Nickey's comments? I've missed 2 meetings so far this fall, so I may have missed it. So could you just give me a brief recap? So
The
Yes,
landlord had withdrawn his application, his approval of the application, so that kind of removed the one. He said he has 2 proposals before the town. I mean, one of them can't go forward without the landlord approval. The second one, he proposed to put all on town property, but there's quite a few kind of complicated legal issues that we have associated with it. And I said this at the last meeting. I mean, the legal department touched bases with me on it like fairly regularly, like asking questions. I think Elena has already determined that, during COVID, there was an ability to put tables and things in the right of way. It may be gone. So the more we research it, the more complicated it's starting to become. And then it's like, what we want to do is really say, here's the law, here's what would have to change, but you can't just kind of do it in pieces. Like, it has to be all researched before you can give somebody a real clear path. And I know it's frustrating time-wise, but it's an issue we've never faced before, and it's really hard. We don't have any precedence on it.
So what is the milestone that we think would make it decisive?
What do you mean by
i-
that?
Is it, is there something written in the law that says, since COVID is no longer applicable,
Well,
you can't?
so when I started doing the research into it, what I learned was that there was the executive order that was issued as a result of COVID that allowed the restaurants to put outside dining to help with that 6 feet separation, and because the restaurant industry was struggling so much as a result of COVID. That has since sunsetted, so that's no longer in
Okay.
effect. When that was in effect, it wasn't just, anybody can put whatever they want on town property. The town actually had to apply to the DOT, New York State DOT. There was a permit process. That permit process no longer exists.
Right.
So it's my opinion, and I'm still looking and waiting for some clarification from DOT, but I think that the only path forward, if the landlord was on board, would be to possibly have a town ordinance that allowed it, and then we would implement a process for that, and there'd be fees and whatever else, just like everything else. But it gets more complicated than that, because then the actual property owner isn't okay with the plan. So does the property owner have less rights than the tenant?
Right.
Even if it was something that was allowed, like it was already in our code and everything.
Okay, but just to
So-
be clear, at least as of today, the executive order that was applicable during COVID that allowed for outdoor seating is no longer in effect.
Correct.
So a plan that any restaurant owner brings to us that has outdoor seating
In the town right of way.
in the town right of way, right, would be a non-starter to begin with.
That's my opinion, but I'm also looking for guidance from New York State DOT to confirm that.
Yeah, because all the outdoor seating that was referred to, you know, like Starbucks and tequilas and all of those things, that's all on private property.
Yeah, no, understood.
Yeah.
Was there a date when that executive order was sunsetted? And I'm just asking
There
relative
is,
to
I just
Mr.
don't know off the
Nietzsche's.
top of my head.
Okay,
It's
so I
not
mean,
56 days. It was before that.
okay,
Yes, it
so
was
it,
before
so it's
that.
not since he filed an
No,
application.
it absolutely is not.
So I mean, isn't that the answer to our question then? Is that we
Well,
can't consider?
I mean, it is, except the other sort of conflicting part is that he wants to try and separate his application from the landlord. And that is something that we don't have.
Yeah, agreed. So we know the landlord issues there and hopefully he understands that. But I'm just coming strictly from the details of the law. If a person is applying for something that legally can't be done, then it's a non-starter.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's frustrating for him, the timeline, but like our legal department is actually taking a lot of their own time to try and help this, you know, provide clarification to both him and to the adjacent property owners. An easy answer would just be like, no, but like we're trying to.
But is
like,
that an incorrect
how-
answer?
Well, I mean.
Legally
potentially-
incorrect?
Yeah, but it's two prongs that we're investigating, right? So the outdoor seating will need clarification on that regardless of the landlord approval or non-approval. But the other question he has before us is, no landlord approval, can I do it anyway?
And there's not a lot of case law on that.
That's the other issue.
So understanding the legal issue, we have the optics issue where he's expecting at the next meeting that we're going to take up this matter, which, yeah, so
I
like
mean,
I'm
we'd like
a
to-
little
I mean-
mystified as his approach. I mean, just.
Yeah, ideally, we'd like to get back to him as soon as we have an answer. Like we're trying, and hopefully we'd be
no
able to
doubt,
get
yeah.
an answer to him within the next. I mean, we'll try to get it within the next 2 weeks, so at least he has some clarification on whether or not he's on the meeting or why not.
Yeah.
I do think communicating with him is really important. It's just we don't have a lot of answers to share with him, and I have emailed him that, and you know.
I mean, from the research from when we brought up this question in our last meeting to today, it sounds like you did quite a bit of research.
Oh, yeah,
Thank
we've
you.
been working on
And it
this.
sounds a little more decisive to me.
Yeah, the last question we really have is sort of.
Like, do we communicate with him with a letter or something that?
Well, no, because we're trying to sort of address. He sends us emails with points, and we're trying to address all of the points.
Because the permitting process that was allowed through the executive order was with New York State DOT, I would personally feel most comfortable if I can get a response from them as to whether or not a local
Understood.
ordinance even, because there are municipalities that do have that a process where they can get a permit for it. But what steps do we have to endure in order?
Right, I recognize what you're doing is you're in the phase here with the DOT of trying to figure out how this could actually work.
And I think that that's really what the applicant wants. I don't think he wants, no, this isn't happening. I think he wants.
Right,
"No,
so
this
you've
isn't
got,
happening, and here's why."
half of you've got members of the community saying that we're bending laws for one applicant, and we've got the applicant saying that we're not being responsive. So my position right now would be if there's a definitive answer on dates of executive orders and the answer is no, then clearly communicate that and we'll move on to another application. That's just one board member's opinion.
Well, if I may, I actually think it's worth, if we believe there is a process whereby the town could establish an ordinance to allow for the safe enjoyment of either sit-down meals or at the very least ice cream at this location in the town right away, I believe that's worth pursuing. I think that's in keeping with the type of pedestrian access and safety that we're trying to promote in this area of town. And, if it's something that residents of Albany and Saratoga can enjoy, why not Niskayuna?
Well, on this particular site, I think the parking remains a huge issue, no matter what else falls out.
Well, it's an issue, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's an issue regardless because we only have a temporary solution for the ice cream
It
window.
is,
So
yeah. One way or another, it does have to come back before the board.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just Alana, it feels like to me, though, the threshold issue really is the landlord, right? And he has the superior rights. If it's not contemplated in the leasehold, in the lease agreement, that, I mean, then isn't it kind of terminate there? Okay, again, I'm not forcing you into an answer, but.
Yes, I mean, I tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
I did have Rob Hess looking into the issue with me as well, just because, I have my initial thoughts, but
Yeah.
it requires a little bit more digging to get, I don't like to just tell somebody this is what I think and,
Yeah.
I like to have the case law and the law to support what I'm saying. So, I mean, yes, those are my thoughts. And I know Rob was helping me to do some research just because, we have a lot going on with the legal department. And
Of course.
it would be helpful if I had somebody that could help with those things. So he was looking into that as well.
I mean, my only point I'd like to make is it feels as if he's making these assertions without the benefit of counsel himself, right?
Correct.
And which is probably putting the burden on you to manage these legal issues, when in fact, he's making assertions of law that he may not enjoy.
Correct.
So, okay, I appreciate the feedback. What I'm trying to unpack is he really needs counsel to really fully manage this, and he hasn't done that yet, right?
He
So-
hasn't done that. And, I said this at the last meeting, like we could just say no and be done, and it's kind of a fine line. Like our legal department's not Mr. Nicky's. We're
They're
not
not the-
Mr.
he's not
Nicky's
your
attorney.
client.
We're not
He is
here
not
to
your client. Understood.
the legal research for him.
Exactly.
But because there are a lot of interested parties and there has been a lot of, public comment on the issue, I think it's important to explain for everybody's knowledge why this board or the town board, if it went to special use permit, why we could or could not do.
Okay, so just to slice this one level further, when we talk about the public comment, was there public comment specific to outdoor seating, or was there public comment specific to the formation of this restaurant in the first place? I recall there was a lot of public comment about the restaurant itself, and a lot of it was positive.
The 200 public comments that he's referring to are for the outside dining only.
Okay.
Yep. The reason that a lot of them weren't read into the public record is that the majority of them, I think like 130 of them, didn't come asking to be under privilege of the floor or public hearing. He had asked them to email the planning department and let them know how they felt. So like the vast majority of them came to me and I shared them with the planning board. You'll have them in your email.
Yeah, no, I agree. I
And
just
the
want
other
to.
ones, we'll attach them to the minutes. But because they had been shared with you ahead of time, but potentially there was a lot of them.
And these are all Niskuna residents, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, most of them have an address assigned to them, but you're not required to, when you send an email to me, put your
Mhm.
address. But the majority of them do seem to have nearby Niskuna addresses.
The only reason I brought it up, Attorney Finnan, is because at the end of the day, that doesn't really impact our role as acting as a legal counsel for the applicant, right? I understand the public is something they favor, but at the end of the day, if there's clarity where the law is concerned, then the answer is the answer.
True. I mean, the answer is the answer, but I think my opinion is just that it's worth at this point doing the legal research, because whether it's the applicant or the town supervisor or somebody at some point is going to ask me, why can't we do this? And then I have the answer.
Well, and it
with-
also gives
with
us
the
a
legal
path-
support to back it up.
But like to Patrick's point, it also gives us a path forward. Like if it's something that the town wants to create in the future, to
Right.
create a town center overlay district, like we need to understand how it works. So I do think that it's valuable legal research, even just from, town center overlay district, comprehensive plan type.
But it is a little bit two-part. I mean, the path forward as far as a local ordinance and DOT approval is one thing, and then there's the other portion of it that is a little bit more specific to the applicant.
So I have a question. The last meeting, Mr. Niki came in and said almost exactly the same thing he said this meeting. So I would be willing to count on it that he's going to be back in the next meeting to say the exact same thing. So when do we as a board or a department or whoever stop and say, you know what the deal is, you understand what's going on. We can't move until we have more exact research, more exact decisions, more exact precedent of whatever may or may not be. I mean, with every due respect to his freedom of speech during pleasure of the floor. I get that. But he's saying the exact same thing.
Mhm.
I mean, you obviously can't tell the gentleman, you need to get an attorney, though he may need exactly that. But so are you prepared again to submit another 5 minutes of pleasure of the floor next week or next?
Well,
If that's what it is, it's frustrating, I think, for him and for us, because why doesn't he understand what's going on?
Well, I can make sure that I reach out to him between now and the next meeting. I mean, I do feel like I have sent him some emails.
You have.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I've been on,
Yeah, I'm sure.
I've been on some of those emails. He's, been made aware that they're legal.
I mean, is it
department's
worthwhile
lawyers are-
sending a letter and CCing the planning board? I mean,
Well,
is
I
that
mean, at some
precedent?
point, we'll probably have to give him some kind of a, like a denial from the planning board, or something like in writing once we're very clear on what the steps are.
Denial or a path forward, of course.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think the point is we're trying, and it's going to take a little while.
I mean, the other option could be is to actually put it on as a discussion item, and we'll just have it as a discussion item there.
I don't think
But
you can do
yeah,
that
because I think we're still ascertaining as to whether or not the
Legally
application can even come to the planning
Yeah.
board for
No,
discussion.
agreed. And I believe actually you mostly answered that question.
Yeah.
Unless there's a very vague contract in there, I think the answer is we can't.
I think it's good to know because we do have outdoor seating in the town of Niskuna, but how does that work? And the last time I was in New York City, it wasn't that long ago, and they still had a lot of outdoor seating in
New
the
York
right
City
of way.
has a whole separate process.
Yeah, right. But
I've learned that too.
it's pretty nice because they closed down whole streets and just
Yeah.
filled them up with outside restaurants, and they've built these little
They take away parking
sheds
and put in.
Yeah, it's very
parking
nice.
spots.
I mean, it definitely works. It's an amenity that I think a lot of people will enjoy far after COVID. So
And I have no doubt that you've been in contact with him. That's why I'm a little mystified that.
well, it happens.
Yep. Okay, anything else on that subject? Okay, usually I poll the board. I'm just going to open the floor under commission business tonight and in the future. Does anybody have any questions for the planning department or legal department? Comments, concerns? Anything?
I've got a lot of training in for you guys. If you don't think you're going to take the webinars, let me know, and then I'll run a couple December seminars like I did last year.
Again, yeah, the Department of State ones, again, are pretty easy to do at home at your convenience.
I love the CDRPC webinars
Yeah.
that I sent
Yeah.
you because I
Sure.
just generally speaking love the CDRPC anyway. Nancy took most of them. It's really nice that they put them as recordings too.
Okay, all right. Hearing nothing else, I have a motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Mr. Scrivby Tennis and seconded by Mr. Flom, since he's got his coat on and ready to go. All right, those favor adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
It's not going off.
I know.
Does someone else turn these microphones off? Mine.
Where did you-